Hello, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. I am just waiting to see us pop up on the screen here, and then we can get started. Oh, here we go. I see us. Yay! All right, ladies. So we are live. So welcome everyone tonight to the Jamaica Diaspora Worldwide Organization Task Force. We call ourselves JDWAT for short, because saying all that over and over and over is a lot. So JDWAT for short. And the last, 2 weeks ago, we started our workshop series on grant writing, because that is one of the areas where nonprofits, not just in the diaspora, but nonprofits just globally, have always experienced challenge, right? And not just in writing grants, but looking for grants. Where do you find grants? How do you know you're ready for a grant? So those are some of the topics we covered during our first two workshops 2 weeks ago. Tonight, we have two ladies who are grant writers, who have written grants, who have been part of the process of writing grants. And I believe, Melanie, you could correct me if I'm wrong, have also been on the other side reviewing grants. And I don't know if you've done the same thing as well, Sherry Ann, reviewing grants.
Right.
What did you say?
I only write grants.
But Melanie has also been on the other side in actually reviewing grants, so that for organizations who are seeking money. So you have two ladies here tonight, both of Jamaican descent, and they're going to tell you about themselves, who are going to share some real knowledge with you this evening. If you're watching this on the replay, make sure in the comments you put replay, so we know that you caught this after we were live. Now, I need you all to grab some pen, some paper, because information you're going to get tonight is going to be very valuable. If you are a member of JDWAT, their presentation will be uploaded to our resource folder, so that you can go back and flip through the PowerPoint if there's something you missed or something you want to remember. In addition, if these ladies are taking clients for grant writing or for consulting as far as grant writing is concerned, their contact information will be on the PowerPoint slides as well, or will be posted in the resource folder, so that you can go back and look at it in the event that you need these particular, whether it's services or you just need to consult with someone who's done this process to get your organization set them in the right direction, right? So if you're part of JDWAT, you will have access to the presentation. It's going to be in the folder. You can go and log in the folder, and all this information will be there. Give us like 48 hours though. Don't go run over there tonight and then send me a message that you don't see it. Give us like 48 hours to catch our breath from all this talking we're going to be doing tonight. And then it will be posted there. If you are not a member of JDWAT, I'm going to put the information in the comments on how you can join our task force, so you can get all this amazing information at your fingertips when you need it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just realized I didn't say my name. I do this so often for JDWAT that I keep forgetting that you get new people all the time. So I am Rachel Dulcine, and I'm the chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Worldwide Organization Task Force. I am a licensed nonprofit consultant. I have been in the nonprofit space for over 2 decades. I know I don't look it, but it is so. For a very long time, I'm extremely passionate about nonprofits. I knew since I was a little girl that I was called to serve. And it has been my complete honor and pleasure to be able to use my skills, my resources, my network, my education, everything that I have learned, earned, and accomplished to help my homeland. And I'm hoping that by leading by example, I inspire others, young Jamaicans, young second-generation Jamaicans, to do the same. Jamaica needs us, and we have an obligation and responsibility to our country. All right, so I'm gonna step off my soapbox so these ladies can have all the time that they need. So without further ado, I bring to you Dr. Sherry Ann Demetrius and Melanie Baker. And tonight, they are going to talk with you about tips and strategies for grant writing. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
No problem. So I'm going to turn over the virtual floor to you.
So I'm going to start the ball rolling. And I am Dr. Sherian Demetrius. I am an educator, and I also work in Florida, and I am also from the beautiful island of Jamaica. I am sharing my screen with you today because I want you to be able to follow, to make notes, and to just to go through and enrich your lives in terms of how you will write grants or you will think about grants going forward. So with that, a big, big welcome to you. Now, today I want to take you on a little journey. And that little journey will tell you how I began at an early beginning and how I mastered some of those grant writing skills to the point where I'm able to write grants for individuals and organizations. So with that, I want you to look at some nuts and what I call some nuts and bolts. And it's from the practitioner's perspective. That means I'm speaking to you from a teacher's point of view and also an individual who has been involved in the grant writing process. So today we will be looking at how to start, how to identify and align with the grants that you might have found, how to plan, and then we're going to do some sample writing because that's important. We want you to leave out of here today ensuring that at least you have got one of those steps down, pat, and you're ready to go and to begin this process. So I would like you to think about grant writing and tell me what comes to your mind when you hear grant writing. So in the chat, I want you to drop 1 or 2 words that comes to your mind when you think about grant writing. So grant writing is Rachel, can you see any responses? But if all the words you think of, some people might say grant writing is difficult, grant writing brings about money, grant writing is painstaking, it's time consuming, it's fun because from it, I can laugh because I've gotten money to fund my project. So if you should take all of those words and put them in a Wordle, this is what it would look like. Think of collaboration, thinking of sustainability of the projects that you will choose. Think about the capacity of your project, what your project would look like, and what is the logistics behind it. What are some things that need to be done? So these are the words that will come to mind and to think about grant writing. So, as I told you before, I wanted to tell you about my early beginning. And my early beginning began in my 2nd grade classroom. I saw that there was an opportunity to write a grant in which a teacher would receive $750. I became excited because I wanted to get something for my class, additional support for my class. And I wrote that grant. Yes, I was nervous. Yes, I didn't know what I was doing. But because I love to write and to read, so I said, okay, let me put it together. And I put it together. And what you're seeing on the screen is a picture of what happened in my classroom, where kids were engaged in what we said was an aquatic think tank. And what it was a set of books all about the ocean, all about fish. And we set up the reading corner. We had shells. We had visits to the aquarium. We made t-shirts, like the t-shirt that the young lady's wearing. We made that in class. We're just cutting out motifs and painting it onto the shirts. We read books. We wrote about the fish. We had an aquarium with fish. Kids were able to be placed on stations in which they rotate. They went and they wrote about what they saw, what they observed in the morning, what happened at lunchtime, and recorded whether or not the fish remain alive. Think about some of the things they could do to keep the fish alive, and all those fun things. So the classroom became a learning environment. It became like a science lab. And I did that for the life of those students within that class for the entire school year, and was able to duplicate the project. Even other teachers bought into the project and was awarded money to do that. So money is there, and money can start from a very humble beginning. So as we begin, this is how I want to tell you or to encourage you to get started. And the first pointer I have is begin with an open mind. I always say if your mind is closed, you do not allow new information to come in. You do not listen and gather from what the individual around you are sharing. And so your minds are closed and nothing new is coming in. So open up your minds to explore different avenues of getting money for your organization. Know what you want and what you desire. And this wanting and the desire is going to take you back to the place where Melanie is going to teach you about your mission and your vision statement. Because if you have those clearly written, clearly understood, can be easily articulated, then you're on the right track. You're ready to go. And as you begin this process, we encourage you to work towards your goal. And sometimes it might be a long, painstaking journey, but at the end of it, you know that whatever you're going for, your hope is that you will be funded and you will have money to support your organization. So let's see what next you will do. The next thing I want you to do is to identify what is it you need, as I said earlier on, and then align it. Align it to the projects that you want to implement. Align it to your outcome. In teaching, we usually say you need an outcome statement because that's what you want at the end of the day. So what is your outcome statement? What do you want at the end of the day? As you think about those questions, you start to identify the foundations that are funding nonprofits. You look for organizations that you can align yourself with and apply for those grants. You're looking for corporations that are doing the same thing, and those government agencies from which you can get funding. Again, ensure there's alignment between the goals that you want to achieve with what the organization itself, who is funding agent, has available for you. When there is alignment, there is synergy. If there's no synergy, then you probably get a denial. And Melanie is going to give you all those top secrets as to how to ensure that you get maximum points in order to get your grants. So that's a lot of thinking. And sometimes our brain becomes, it's all over the place. And you're trying to rein everything in a nice little package. In order to do that, I, as a writer, what I do, I create a plan. And I create a plan because it gives me structure. I know exactly what I want to do here. I know what is going to be next. And as I look at my chart, I'm able to see the connections and I'm able to see the alignment. So I encourage you, like what I do when I write for people or I'm writing for myself, I create a chart to document the grants identified. I read, and I put the word read because you're going to read it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, because you want to make sure You clearly understand what the grant requirements are. What are those guidelines that I must absolutely follow in order to get the maximum points to get those monies? You're going to prioritize the things. So you went on a search. You identified 5 or 6 grants and you said, okay, I'm going to put them on my table that I have at the bottom of the chart. I'm going to write the grant title. I'm going to look what the funding agency is. I want to see what amount of money I can apply for. I want to look at, are there anything that I must do before I actually submit this grant? I'm going to look at due dates, and I'm going to put any other notes that I think is important to me as I start writing. So here's what will happen next. I have this nice table set up with all my grants. And let's say I found 5. And those 5 align with my organization's plan, my organization end product, my organization's goalposts where I want to reach. It's all lined up, it's in sync, there's synergy. And I'm saying now, I'm going to narrow down my list. I want to get to 1 or 2. I can probably only manage 1 now, but this is my first choice. This will be my second choice. And I start working. I gather all my resources. I have my mission and vision statement, and I'm going to show you some other things that you need to have right up front as you begin this process. So I gather all my resources, and then I say to myself, yes, I am ready to work. I have some grants that I found and knew what the amount of money is. They align nicely with my end product, what I want to do, and so I'm going to move forward. As you move forward, you have to exercise patience. I'm missing a sign. Because it's going to take you a while to think through, to plan, to read the grant again so that you're fully understood. And then you're ready to let's play ball. We're ready to begin. One of the things that you must have is your mission and your vision statement. So if I meet you in the elevator and I say to you, what is the mission of your organization? You should be able to say it in 1 minute. And you should be able to tell me the goal and your hopes and your dream for your organization. Where are you going? Who are you working with? And what your plans are. Very sharp and to the point. You should also have your board of directors, that listing. Have your tax ID ready. Have pictures and videos of things that your organizations have done. For example, if you do a summer camp, you should capture those moments in real time and using pictures and videos so that if you're writing a grant and they're asking for evidence of the work that you have done over the years, you can say, okay, I know where this is. You can go over there and pull those pictures, pull those videos, and send it as a part of the support for on your application. Again, another good thing is to get a letter of support. Where are you going to get that? It's going to come from the people within your community who knows your work, whose lives you have impacted, or the children, or the families that you have impacted. Those are the people who will make those letters of support for you. Put those away. Keep them in a place where it's ready and you can upload it with your submission files. Look at things like program schedule. So you had a 6-month program on planting vegetables in a garden. It was funded by another organization. And you have pictures, you have videos, you have a schedule as to when the people came in, what they did. Those are the strong evidence that you need as you go through this, this writing process. So once you have those things, I would say to you that you're ready to write. And I have on the screen a sample of a question that is being asked. And it says, describe the organization's track record. That is your organization, your experience and expertise for providing high quality, comprehensive, specialized cultural arts or science summer camp program for children or youth in your community. If you had a question like that, what would you write? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. Then I want you in the chat to write a sentence or two. So, and then we'll ask Rachel to share so we can see what your thoughts are. So think about it. Look at the words. Think about your organization track record. That means how well you did. What have you done? Talk about your experience. Talk about your expertise for providing high quality, comprehensive, and specialized cultural arts or science summer camp program for children or youth in your community. So think about that, and I want you to drop a sentence or two as to what you would include in your response. And that was taken from a real application for a grant.
I'll let you know if we get any responses
Okay,
to the question.
I'm going to wait 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to pull your attention back in. Do we have any response yet?
No, not yet, but sometimes they're delayed. So
Yeah.
if I see any coming, I'll hold them on for the Q&A.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what I would have included as I look at that. So I want to begin with the year in which my organization started and what I have done so far. So as I say, my organization, we started in 2009, working with students and youth disadvantaged in the community. In our first summer camp program, we served 25 youth and children within the community. Students we met for 5 weeks, every day from 8 to 10. And our focus was on building skills that will enhance their ability to think critically and to also integrate the whole idea of farming within their communities. We planted vegetable gardens. The kids were able to, at the end of the program, to reap some of the vegetable they planted. The tomatoes grew well. You know, just talking about some of the things that went well in the camp. And then as you go on, you will go ahead and document with your pictures and your videos some of those things that work well. And then you can also share with them copies of letters of support that came from students students' parents who participated in the program. And then you can say in 2 years later, you had about 50 kids, this is what they did, and you provide this picture that covers provide a very comprehensive detail of what you have done as an organization. So as we move forward, I'm going to invite Melanie to join me because we are going to do some real reality check as she looks at what are some of the pointers you need to bear in mind as we look at a grant. What are some of the questions that are likely to be asked and how you will respond to that. Melanie, I'm going to stop sharing and then you can go ahead and join.
Thank you, Dr. Sherian, for that very comprehensive presentation, really on the nuts and bolts of the grant writing process. Such a great interview. These are the steps and the information that you need to gather as you are beginning. And you have been having this discussion with our very innovative head of the JDTAN task force, Rachel Dulcine, over the past couple of weeks. And it is such a pertinent conversation because there's so much grant money out there and we want to have more of it in the hands of those from more communities or grassroots organizations on the ground doing the work. A little bit about myself. My name is Melanie Gooden-Baker. I am a special education teacher. I have taught for over 20 years, and I have found that in my most, in addition to being a special education teacher professionally, my personal life intersected with my professional life in that my husband and I have 3 boys, the oldest of which has autism and visual impairment. He's multiply differently abled, legally blind, developmental disabilities. He's our miracle. And it is through, I think, more so my personal experience in really accessing resources for my son that I realized just the difference that parent engagement makes, even more so than as an educator in the classroom. And so I became very involved on the parenting side and doing work around really empowering parents, because there's such a difference that parents make in the lives of, the outcomes for their students. And so 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I formally started my company, Project Resets, Restoring Expectations Through Socio-Emotional Trauma Survival, in which I would do all the work that I've been doing over the years, the tutoring, the mentoring, my passion for writing, and it led me to grant writing. And so my library actually made a course available to the patrons of the library from our local community. And so I did this online course, and I had to write a sample grant similar to the question or Dr. Sherian put up. And there was a professor on the other end who would score. It was a virtual course, but it introduced me to the whole world of grant writing. And I want to tell you right off the bat that not every grant that you write you're going to win, but with each experience, you become more skilled and more proficient. And so the first grant I wrote, which was for a federal grant, which for organization or network of organizations or consortium of organizations. We did not win that grant, but they gave us feedback, and that feedback becomes so that's constructive criticism that helps you to fine-tune your process, to streamline the work you're doing. As our Dr. Sharon used the word, to align your language through language to show the good work you're doing and how it aligns with the funder's request for proposal. Because when you're writing a grant, it's actually a proposal to receive these funds from these different organizations that, in which there is a marriage, a marrying of your work and what they're looking to invest in. So I'm going to share my screen, because I then went on to win a grant for $25,000. So I am just so proud of that. And as a part of winning that grant. It was a grant for our local state. They asked for those who would like to apply to be a part of the scoring process, which I welcome the opportunity to apply to do that, because I understood that if I'm trained to score, that it will give me even better understanding of the process of really how to fine tune that like that grant, so that it makes an impact. Because one of the key things that we don't often really take into consideration is the fact that grants, it's very competitive. There are organizations that are writing and requesting funds. And so you need to be able to put your best foot forward. And Dr. Sherian gave us so many great tips and nuggets on how to do that. And so I almost want to think of this time that we have together as a little mini boot camp, because we're going to go now into how to take your ideas and take all this information you've gathered together as you just went through with Dr. Sherian, and now how to really go through and edit it so that you're making the most impact with your language. So I'm going to share my screen. So, or grant checklist. So you want to make sure you have clearly defined and measurable outcomes with specific plans to achieve and document results in a specified time period. You want to show that this investment in your organization, this is not money wasted, that you are going to have evidence that this money is well spent, this money accomplished what it was set out to do. So you can measure the change that results because of the intervention that your organization put in. And I love the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. So your goals, your objectives, they're not just kind of ethereal and without any kind of shape or form, but you really want to be very clear and concise. What are you going to do with this money, and how are you going to use it to be effective? And you are led by organizations that have the capacity to achieve desired results and demonstrate commitment to diversity. We know now more than ever the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. You want to show how your organization reflects the community that you are serving and is committed to that cultural cohesiveness. And so your organization, you're looking at your organizational capacity. What is your staffing capacity? Your tech resources, you're partnering with other organizations and leveraging your networks. These are all the things that you want to have in your toolkit. You want to demonstrate the potential for local or regional impact that are scalable or can be replicated. So you really want to have a clear sense of your formula. What exactly is it that you do? What are the pieces that make you stand out as against, as distinct and separate from other organizations doing similar work? And how can you take what you do and continue to increase it so that it's scalable? It can be replicated in other contexts, in other cultures with bigger numbers. It can be multiplied. You want to address gaps in current service or program models. You need to show that you are different than what everybody else is doing. I loved the example Dr. Sherian gave when she won the grant that brought the science of program that combined literacy, math, and science in this fun and engaging way with trips and art. And so she brought funding to support that program into her classroom, which went over, and it was scalable in that other teachers, other classrooms became a part of the project, and they got funding as well. So this was a novel way to look at learning. And so this is what you want to show, that, you know, the witty invention, the innovation that you're coming up with out of the box. You know, it's just not what everybody else is doing, that you've ventured out into the deep, you've launched out, and you're doing something different that is effective. I keep using and repeating that word because effectiveness is key in really winning the attention of the funders. You also want to show that you are offering solutions. You want to demonstrate the solutions that address root causes of problems, not just a band-aid solution, but you're getting to the root of the matter. You're getting to, you're showing the evidence-based best practice, some documented, you know, using data to substantiate that the work that you do has multi-layered implications, and demonstrate collaboration and partnership for greater impact. It can't just be you by yourself. You know, no man is an island, but how are you working with others and leveraging your networks? Demonstrate a strong community leadership, engagement, and cultural competence. You need to show that you are involved in the community that you're serving. How are you engaging the community? That cultural competence, that cultural cohesiveness. How are you reflecting the culture of the community that you serve? As I shared earlier, you can't just be, you know, like just completely disconnected from the community that you serve, and you're just pulling out some, you know, just cookie cutter approach. But you're tailoring the work you do to reflect the needs of the community that you serve. Employ effective best practices strategies, evidence-based best practices. One of the big needs is to show how you are able to serve those low-income, underserved, or special needs populations, those marginalized groups, those groups that, you know, you know, it's like you're troubleshooting. You are showing that you have a way to reach these more challenging communities and break through those barriers to connect and help them to be propelled to the next level. And that you have the potential to leverage additional dollars. It is critically important that you show that you have some other funds, other streams of income into your budget. It can't be that the grant is the only way your organization is planning to survive. You have to show that you have a plan to have some other ways to bring income in, that the grant is just one source of income and resources. So not only in terms of dollars monetary, but resources that you're able to leverage to show how you're going to keep your organization going, keep your non-for-profit, keep it really, keep it that it's sustainable, that it's if the grant funding isn't continued after 5 years, you're not going to just fold and the work is going to go away. And that you have the potential to favorably increase visibility of your organization, of the donors. And so this is where we're going to talk about your publication. I love when Dr. Sharon spoke about your evidences, your video clips, your brochures, you know, flyers, like your social media is such a huge way that shows connection to the community, your letters of support. So these are all ways that you're going to increase visibility of the work that you're doing, and show press releases, reaching out to your local political figures and letting them know that you're here and that, you know, the work that you're doing. This is where you want to blow your horn. This is where you want to yell from the rooftops, you know, we're over here, you're making your light shine. You know, you're not going to be, this is not where you want to be modest and humble. I don't want to toot my own horn. Yes, you want to draw as much attention as you possibly can to the work you're doing. Now, as we think about the grant proposal that our Dr. Sherian asked us in terms of the cultural arts and the science program, and she gave, you know, ideas where you're talking about what's your organization's mission, what's your organization's vision, what's the work that you're doing in culture, and how often are you meeting, like all those details. So as you're thinking out the details now in terms of your particular organization, you're going to streamline your language that it is as concise, as tight as you can say it in the most impactful and brief way possible, that it's almost like you need every word to count, so that as the readers go through your grant proposal, the language conveys with specificity and clarity what you are, who your organization is. What is your organization's mission? What is the work that you do? You know, that elevator pitch, you know, the time it takes you to go on an elevator ride. You know, you think of Shark Tank, where you're able to just say in that 60 seconds, who is your organization? What is the thing that makes you you? The history of your organization. When did it begin? What was accomplished in the time that it has existed? Who are its leaders? What with the leadership structure? What are the partners, those that you're working with in the community? And what is the impact of your organization? And what has your organization done since this particular grant that we applied for focused specifically on providing pandemic relief? And so we're looking at what was done during the pandemic. Did you just fold up shop because things got difficult, or were you able to show how you rose to the occasion in a challenging situation? And because, if you notice, this is what's asked for in terms of the context of the organization, you get maximum points if you address everything that's asked. And this is where we were encouraged in the presentation before by Dr. Sherian to read and read again, and get second and third readers to go over to look and see what is being asked for in the grant proposal request, and make sure you address everything that is asked in every area. We get down to the second section, which looks at program design and evidence-based strategy. You know, what is it that your program is aiming to accomplish, and what are the strategies? How are they evidence-based? What is the design of the program? And you want to be specific and comprehensive. Who are you targeting? You want to show that you are naming the audience. You know, who is this program for, and that you are specific. And again, if you are weak, if you don't name the program, but you talk about the strategies, if you miss anything that's asked, you're going to lose points. And remember, it's competitive. It's who gets the highest points. So when all the numbers are compiled for all the different organizations, it's who gets the highest points that's going to be awarded the funds. And how are you going to disseminate the information about the resources and services that's delivered by your agency, by your organization, working with other stakeholders, workshops, trainings, showing that you are connected to your community, families, educators, the community at large. Again, you lose points if you missed, even if you said it in an earlier question, but when it came to the next question, you didn't say it, you're going to lose points, because Every question has a rubric, a scale of points that's awarded based on whether you answer that particular questions. And there are different approaches to scoring. Some scoring, you know, like when I scored, I didn't score from my area, my region where I live and where we apply for a grant, but I scored another region. And then those from another region were scoring for our area. You have some where you're, you know, where the scores are, then we're going to be scoring specific questions. And then the questions are going to be put together. And then you have where different scorers score and they share. So they're all different models of scoring. So you want to make sure in every question that you're addressing what is asked of you. And again, the community connectedness, cultural cohesiveness, linguistic responsiveness. If you are serving, you know, the immigrant community, like we are here, and you're serving other immigrants, you want to show what is your connection to that community. You know, are you going to bring on interpreters if it's a predominantly Spanish speaking? Are you going to be looking at, you know, the immigrant culture from where this community arrives? In your cultural arts, for example, in the example that we were just asked by Dr. Sharian, is it that your cultural arts is going to include things specific to the culture from which the students come from, or is it that you're and so you're showing a cultural equivalency? So it's not just a Eurocentric model. I'm not just exposing you to the dominant culture, but we're going to include aspects of the community that we serve and their culture. It could even be geographic, like I'm in an urban, I'm serving an urban community, and so I need to connect with their reality. Or I'm in a rural community. So you have to show how you are reflective of the community and prioritizing access, because the whole idea is to have buy-in and engagement. And again, if you notice, the language is repeated for the maximum points: specific and comprehensive. Specific and comprehensive. It is repeated constantly, because that is, so you're going to be, as you're describing, you're going to show how you have a wide approach, and you're also going to show how specific, the exact strategies that you're using, responsiveness, that you're strategic. You miss any one thing, so it may be a good description, but this part is lacking, you're going to lose points. And how will you advance equity? Again, we remember diversity, equity, inclusion. It's just not one, but we're showing that diverse, that rich, you know, the richness of the community that we serve. And so here we're looking at the disproportionate impact of COVID on communities of color and low-income communities. But whatever the crisis situation is, how are you going to mitigate it through the strategies you have? How are you going to make it better? Now, data and evidence, those resources Dr. Sharian spoke about. How are you going to determine that what you are offering is what the community needs? Your needs assessment, and how are you going to target them to the subpopulations in your community? Your evaluation, where you're evaluating the work that you do, surveys, you know, really engaging with the community that you serve. What are your intended outcomes? And again, see the specific and comprehensive. Always the need to show that the fact that you are not just pigeonholed into one strategy, but it's comprehensive. It's a wide, you're thinking of the big picture, because no problem has just one root cause. So you're looking at it from multi-layered, and you're specific. You're saying this is exactly what we're going to do. We're very strategic. I like when Dr. Sharon spoke about synergy. You're aligning your work with the needs of the community, which is this very same needs that the organization, that the foundation that's giving the funds, whether it's the state, the federal government, local government, philanthropic organization, foundations. So they're thinking about the problem that they're trying to solve. So that's where now the alignment is what's going to bring everybody on the same page in order to show that you are going to be the best person to do the most with the dollars that have been given to you. What are your intended outcomes and how will you measure progress impact? Again, surveys, assessment tools, attendance, the fact that the different ones are showing up, that they're participating. All these are all ways that you're gathering that data. And our final section is the capacity to manage resources and budget. You must have a system in place to manage the money. You must have to be able to show some evidence of how have you been handling your your financial program thus far. What is the is it an online financial management system that you use? Like, how are you working with what you currently have? What does your budget look like? A budget is a plan of action that is expressed monetarily. So your budget must be aligned with your mission and vision for your organization. So for example, in the question that Dr. Sherian posed in the request for proposal about cultural arts. So you're an organization and you're about cultural arts and science enrichment. So, your STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, or STREAM, where you include reading as well, science, technology, reading, engineering, arts, mathematics. And so this is your organization. This is what your organization is about. Your budget must be tied to that mission. Your budget should not be completely, disconnected with the mission of your organization. So you are going, again, specific and comprehensive of both fiscal and management systems. So your fiscal system, like fiscal management, how you're managing the monies. Are you using QuickBooks, PayPal? What are the different softwares are out there to manage funds? And do you also have a system in place? Somebody who is doing the accounting, somebody who's checking the books, because you want to show that fiscal responsibility, that you are going to manage the funds correctly. You also want to, I'm going to say one more thing about the budget, but just before I do that, you want to indicate those who you're going to serve, the numbers. So you want to be specific. We have served this many families, this many students in the past, and now we are going to increase it by this amount of percentage with this amount of money is what it took to work with this number of students, and now with this additional income we're going to be able to work with more students. You must know the numbers. You can't be at a loss. You can't be like guessing. It's kind of hazy, it's kind of foggy. Remember, specific, comprehensive. How many families? What is the layers of impact of the work you do? It affects the students, it affects the community, the families, the parents, and all the different the secondary benefits. You want to have all of that information at your fingertips that you're going to include in your written statement of the work that you do. And as I wrap up, I just want to say about the budget, it must be realistic compared to your goals. So when you go from your mission to your vision is how you're going to accomplish your mission. So with your vision now, you're going to start getting into your objectives. Again, SMART, measurable, achievable, accountable, realistic, and timely. And as you have those goals, the budget, the money that you have laid out it must reflect that mission. So if it's about cultural arts, you're going to have, okay, we're going to use this portion of the funds because we're going to go to the theater. We're going to use this portion of the funds because we're going to need this to do experiments. This amount of funds, we're going to use it because we need to purchase musical equipment and things for dance and so on. But your funds should just not be, we need to, we need to kind of refurbish the building. We want to give a makeover to the building. We want to change the color. So we need money for paint. We need money for, but is that, like, you want to show the priority of the mission and the vision. If you're saying, okay, the students are going to be doing a beautification project and they're going to be looking at so it's not even necessarily, it's how you express the rationale behind how those dollars are to be spent, so that it's always tied to the mission, the vision, the objectives. And you want to be complete, you want to be thorough, and again, realistic. If it's missing details, you lose points. And you can't afford to lose points because, again, remember, it's competitive. And you see your organization scored, if you have any comments, total, and then you're going to, when all the scores are in, it's to go through and tally up the highest score, and that becomes the winner of the grant. The grant that we won, there were, I think, 3 organizations from our Suffolk County region that won, including our organization, and that's because we had the highest score. And my prior experience for the bigger grant that I had lost, the federal grant, gave me experience in winning the state grant that we won. And we're going to try again to get a federal grant. We're going to try again to go for that bigger grant. But each experience, you learn some more, you fine tune. The scoring experience was definitely very beneficial. I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do that. And I thank you for this time to share my experience. I'm still learning, and that's the beauty of this work, is that you continue to learn, and as you collaborate and share ideas with one another, you learn more. I just learned and got a fresh perspective just even in the discussion with Dr. Sharian earlier. And so this is how writing works. It's like a writing workshop, that mini boot camp. You're learning from one another, synergy. You're sharpening one another. Thank you very much.
This is a lot of information that was given. Melanie left us 2 minutes, and I wrote down, I have 11 questions. I wrote down between both your presentations, and I know, Dr. Sharian, you have to run. And I know that the amazing panel that we have coming up next will probably be able to answer. I know they will, not probably, some of these questions. But before you go, Dr. Sharian, first, thank you both. This was really amazing. And as you're talking, I'm like, I know Melanie used the word boot camp, and I'm like, we may need to think about doing something like this for the organizations in the diaspora, because it's something that's needed, that kind of focused small group work on all this information, some amazing information you gave tonight. So you've planted a seed in my head. So thank you so much for coming on tonight and for sharing your expertise. Dr. Sharian, you talked about the grant plan that you use to kind of organize the grants as you find them, or as an organization looks for them. Is there a particular, and then you talked about prioritizing them. Is there a particular criteria that you recommend or that you use to determine which grant should be a priority or will be the priority grant?
One that aligns best to what I need, what my organization wants to do. And the one that, sometimes the one that has the date, in terms of the date, the timeline and the date, and which I have to refocus, to plan and to write. And sometimes these grants have a early first read. So you can turn it in. And if you want to make that first read date, you want to get put it up top, start working on that one, get your first read and get your feedback, and then you can do your final submission. So when you look at the big picture, what you're looking at is which one is going to best suit my organization at this time, which one I think that if I go for it right now, I am able to get through with the money that I will need to support my organization.
And it also sounds like which one gives you ample time to write
Yes.
it, to write it well, even if it's an early read, so you can write it well. And then one last question before you hop off. In your opinion, do you think there's such a thing as submitting too many grants at one time in any particular time period in the year?
I don't think there is, because sometimes an organization might have funding, which is very, very important, because you don't want to say, well, I'm going to use 100% of this grant without having no additional funds to support your work. So sometimes the organization is trying to find that balance between where you are, where you want to achieve, and how you're going to get there using those funds. So you have to look at it at different angles and to decide, this is the best one for me right now, but I might need to do 3 others in order, if in case one of these fell through, at least I'm not here sitting waiting for additional funds. So there's something in the pipeline, work it. But in the meantime, you have to be very precise and make sure that alignment is there, because we want to make sure that your mission statement, what is it that your organization does, is aligned to what is being offered.
Got it. All right. Great stuff. So thank you again. I know, Melanie, you're staying for the panel, and unfortunately, Dr. Sherian is running away from us. But you will have contact information for her in the event that you do want to reach out to her for any type of assistance or with any further questions. And so, Dr. Sharon, you are
for me to share this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to see you outside of just the leadership group. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. So I see that Christina has arrived, and Karen, am I saying your name right?
Karen, you are.
Okay. All right, great. Have arrived. Thank you both so much. Oh, I love the hair. Go on now. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We have one of our panelists who unfortunately COVID caught up with them, and so they are down with COVID, so she will not be joining us. So it'll be us tonight, but I know that even with the 4 of us, it's going to be a very lively conversation. As I mentioned at the close of the last segment, Melanie and Dr. Sherian gave a really intense presentation on tips and strategies for grant writing. And I wrote a whole bunch of questions that came to mind as they were talking that I didn't get to ask during that session. So I'm hoping to get to some of them. I know I sent you guys 7 questions, but as they were talking, I was like, ooh, there's some other questions here that I think might be even more meaningful and beneficial to the folks who are watching us now and who'll be watching the replay. We have normally the folks who view are very quiet in the comments. And so I'll be going back and forth between YouTube and Facebook, and then my own questions to kind of get us started. So before I start to pepper you with all the questions that I have for you tonight, I would like you to introduce yourselves. I know, Melanie, you gave an introduction of yourself already, and if you can always feel free if you want to add anything or reintroduce yourself again for anyone who may be coming on for the 8 o'clock segment. So I will start with Christina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Stocks. I am a consultant at CES Consulting Group, and I work in a nonprofit in Baltimore, Maryland as a grant specialist. And for another foundation in Maryland, I review proposals for funding. It's nice to
Oh,
meet
wow. So
everyone.
you're on both sides. Look at that. Yes. So you and Melanie have that experience on both sides. Awesome. Karen, hope I'm saying it right.
It's Kieran. Thank you. We'll get it by the end of the session
Yes.
today. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for the invitation to participate in the panel. My name is Kieran Smith. I am the principal at Amana Consulting, which I founded in 2017. I'm a native New Yorker. I am in Baltimore, Maryland. I have been here for over 15 years. I'm a project manager by training with a background actually in civil engineering and community development. So I took a very unlikely course to the nonprofit space, but it was based on my passion for mission-based work, particularly capacity building work. And so that's much of what I do in my consulting capacity with organizations that are small, less than $50,000 a year in annual revenues to more than $1 million in revenue. And I too have been on both sides as a technical assistance provider, helping folks do their applications, but then also providing assistance to the funder. And so the two things I just wanted to start with was I have this grant writing philosophy where first and foremost, you begin with the end in mind. And then secondly, know your funders inside and out. So those are the two principles that I wanted to just kind of put on the table there as we enter into this conversation. So thank you.
I love that. And, Karen, your journey to nonprofit, I think most of us who ended up in a nonprofit space, journey has just been as odd. My undergrad was to become an FBI profiler. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be like Criminal Minds, a profiler for the FBI, specifically profiling violent juvenile offenders. That was what I did my undergrad in, and here I am in the nonprofit space doing absolutely nothing to do with that. But those skills have allowed me to do is I people watch, and it's made me very intuitive about people. The things that you learn and the skills they teach you and the stuff that you read. So it came in useful, but yeah, that's what I wanted to be, was an FBI profiler. So
thank you for letting me know I'm not alone.
You're not alone. You're not alone. Melanie, introductions again, ×2.
So my background, well, in college, I was pre-law. And then I ended up in education. Interestingly enough, I did start a master's in public administration because I've always had a heart for this work, but then I ended up in education, and I chuckled to myself because after 20 years working in education, I'm working with in the classroom and just different areas in education, that I'm in this particular space now where, especially around parent engagement and capacity building in that regard, where now it's the social my company is a social enterprise company. So we're social enterprise work and or nonprofit development. So yes, and my husband and I, we have 3 boys. My oldest of which, as I often share, has autism and legally visually impaired, and so that's a big part of what drives my commitment to parent engagement in the work that I do, because I understand and I realize that the parents make such a difference in the outcomes for their students. It's so nice to be on this panel with all of you lovely ladies.
Awesome. And I am Rachel Dosine. I am the task force chair for the Jamaica Diaspora Worldwide Organization Task Force, which you see behind me. We're also known as JDWAT, that's our acronym. And we are the task force that's part of JDTAN, where we house all the organizations around the globe. We want to be a hub for the organizations around the globe that are directly serving Jamaica or Jamaicans abroad. Or maybe organizations that were founded by Jamaicans who are just serving the community in which they live. We want to be the hub, we're the resource hub for them, to help provide workshops like these that helps to guide their work, as well as we assist in any type of leveraging connections, pointing them in the right direction if they need assistance with something. That's why you're on here tonight. So we're like I always think that we're like almost like a concierge service at a hotel. they're visiting, but they come to us when they want suggestions, recommendations, direction, et cetera. So that's our focus, and that's our goal with JDWAT. All right, so I really liked that Karen started with philosophies, right? Which for her is start with the end in mind and know your funder, which I think are two fundamentally important parts of grant writing. When Christina did her segment 2 weeks ago, she talked about knowing your funder. She talked about the grant writing process, and Melanie and Dr. Sherman went into that again tonight to reiterate, but Christina really dived deep. And so the two philosophies that you mentioned, Karen, I see that thread flowing through, and you weren't even present for any of these presentations. So we definitely have synergy there. So I'm going to start with the conversation with misconceptions. There are quite a few misconceptions that nonprofits or boards, nonprofit leaders have about grants or the grant writing process. What are some of in your experience, what are some of the misconceptions that you've come across with the nonprofits you're working or the clients you may work with as regards to grants and grant writing? Let's see. I'll start with Karen.
When I read this question, there are three things that came to mind. The first one was canned proposals that don't align with the funder's requirements or the funder's niche. And so there are many people who think they can come up with this like magic proposal that they can send to every funder and that it's going to be a successful ask. And I find that this is a misconception, because really the funder wants to know that you took the time to understand what's important to them. The second one I had was randomly selecting grants to apply for without assessing them for suitability. It's like, oh, it's a grant and it's for this amount of money. Let's go apply for it. Is it suitable for you though? Is the timing right? Are you ready? Is it aligned with what you're trying to do? And then the third one is expecting a grant writer to develop your program for you. This probably should have been number one. Often folks will come and say, we want to go for a grant. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, okay, what's your program? And they're like, oh, I thought you were going to write that. No, we're not program developers in that space. We are grant writers, which is taking your program and helping you to articulate it in such a way that it attracts a funder, which is very different than actually developing your program and your implementation plan and your schedules and all of that. That is program development, and that really needs to happen before you approach a funder. So those were the three that jumped out at me. I see some heads nodding. So
yeah, those are three really good ones.
Okay.
Melanie or Christina, do you have any other misconceptions to add?
I just want to add on to the last one that she said. Let's stretch this out a little bit farther. Don't find a grant, then try to create a program on the grant. Do not. If you don't have a program already developed that you took the time and wrote it out, and then you find a grant that matches, that's great. But don't do it the other way around. It doesn't work out like that. It comes across in your application. And if you do get the grant, most likely you're going to fail implementing the program because your priorities are backwards at this time. I mean, grants, you might find a grant like, oh, this is what I want to do, but I don't have it written out yet. That grant will come around again. It's better to have all your nest eggs lined up before you jump into a field and get eaten by the shark.
And it's funny because right here on my little piece of paper, and you can't really see it, I had organizations should focus on a grant to fit the organization, not the organization to fit the grant. Because that is what happens, is that they see a grant and they try to squeeze that organization somehow, some way, because they want the money. You're a square peg, the grant is a circle, and they cause themselves so much pain and waste of time, and they could have gone to look for a square peg grant because they're in such desperation for the funding. And I definitely want to talk about desperation and grant writing and really looking at sustainability. And you know what, let's talk about it right now. That's not one of the questions, but let's talk about it right now. So because I think this particular conversation leads right into that, right? Sustainability. Should organizations be using grants as a means to sustain the organization? Yes or no, and why? Why or why not? Hey, we might as well get to it.
Organizations definitely should not use a grant to be the only source of income, source of revenue. That's why a lot of times organizations' programs are shut down out of nowhere because they rely on one funder who might have funding for 3 years, 5 years, or you got lucky for 10 years. That funder might change what their priorities are, and then you're out of luck.
Yeah.
And what you're going to do. So that's why it's very important when you do find a one funder who supports your program, continue looking for additional grants. You got to have different sources of revenue. And actually, if you can develop another source of revenue, let's say you have an arts program for teenagers and they create artwork. A source of revenues could be selling that artwork. The teenager gets 9% of what they make and you get 10%. That's revenue coming in. So you got to have more than one way to have money coming in. And because funders will tell you, and I mentioned in my workshop a couple of weeks ago, I'm not going to provide funds for you forever. And I need to see that you're looking at other routes. And that could be private grants. It could be government grants. It could be donations. It could be in-kind donations. But on a grant application, a lot of times they ask them to see that information. So they don't want you, they want to see it. You can't just say it. They want to see it. And you got to be able to provide them with that.
Karen or Melanie, anything to add to that? You're on mute.
I'm yielding to Melanie if she had something she wanted to offer.
I was actually thinking about, I totally concur. You definitely do not want to show that your only source of income is the grant. You have to have another way. The grant, actually, that may be one of the reasons that you don't get the grant, because they want to see that you have a financial plan in place that shows that you are able to sustain yourself, that your prudent use of your funds. And something that I think connects both to sustainability and the question you asked before about misconceptions. We know that the process is very competitive, but one of the things that puts you above a notch above other those seeking funding is that you have a lot of collaboration. Sometimes you get in this mindset that because it's competitive, I want to try and do it by myself. But the more that you show that you are, you have these key stakeholders, you have partnerships with other organizations, and together you're going to leverage each other's resources. It's the bigger you draw a funder wanting to pour into you. So yes, it's competitive, but there has to be partnerships that you're able to leverage your connection with each other when you're applying for a grant.
Because essentially, a grant is, in my opinion, is no different than you going to the bank to get a loan. That bank is invested. Now the grant, the funder, there's no interest on this grant, but not in monetary. The interest they want to see is that you've taken this money and that you've doubled, tripled, quadrupled change. You've impacted lives with this money they've invested. So, going for a grant is similar to you're going to ask an investor, here's what I'm doing. Here's the impact it's going to have. Here's all these other connections that I have. And that investor then sees how their money will be stretched, how their money will do good in a much bigger way. And that's really how whenever I talk to clients about grant writing and going for grants, really how you look at it is you're going to an investor to ask them to invest in your mission, invest in your vision. What is this investor going to get back in return for this investment? Because it's not going to be interest, but they want to see how that money is working. The other thing before I go to Karen, I wanted to also add is it's not just not going to one funder, depending on one funder for funding. But as Christina said, grants should not be your only way of generating revenue. That is a rat race that is never ending. And I've seen organizations, especially small startup ones, spend so much energy on chasing it. That's what I call it. I call it popcorn grant. grant writing where it's, ooh, there's one over there, ooh, there's one over there, ooh, there, and they spend all this time really chasing all these grants because they need they're desperate for the funding. And some of the other ways they can generate revenue, fee-based services. Can you start a social enterprise? Can you start a business that's generating revenue? Fees for service. Is there there's fundraising, there's in-kind donations. So really having a diverse financial portfolio, which is a whole nother workshop. But grants also should not be the sole funding for your organization. And honestly, in my opinion, grants should be no more than half. Because as Christina said, when funders change their direction, because some grants are politically driven or socially driven by the social issues, right, that are happening. When that dries up or something else becomes sexy, what happens to you and and this nice dress, AKA the program that you've now bought? How are you going to pay? How are you going to pay for this dress that you've bought because it was sexy, what you were doing, right? And so really looking at grants as another stream of income, not your mainstream, right, of income. Anything else, Karen?
I think we touched on it, and Melanie mentioned leveraging and how important that is. I thought that was key to this, and understanding that there's a market for the work that a lot of nonprofits do. And I think that the apprehension of entering into the contracting space prevents them from really taking advantage of other sources of revenue through fee for service and contracts for the services that they offer. And that can be a more predictable stream, maybe a little delayed, but predictable in the sense that that these constituents that you serve, they have that need, and they're going to usually have it maybe annually or seasonally. And so you can kind of anticipate that. Whereas with grants, you don't know whether you're going to be selected or not. And I've worked with organizations that have been in existence for 20 years, and they were really surprised when some of their grants didn't get awarded. And it was just what you mentioned, the season had changed. There was a different focus, and they weren't particularly prepared for that, right? And maybe took it for granted a little bit. And so I think that all of these things that were mentioned are very important to that aspect of the process.
So to that point about the seasons changing, and I know that you're all doing work in this space, right? And so I know that you probably are able to see the forest for the trees, right? You have to be able to have this broader view, so you can see in the distance that, hold on a second, I think there's going to be a shift a year from now because of what you're kind of seeing in shifting in, whether it's socially or politically. How important do you think it is for nonprofits to cultivate that type of foresight? Is it foresight? Yeah, the type of foresight. I know that strategic planning, is this word that's used, and so many organizations that sit down and they go up this whole big plan, but it really has no foresight. You're not really looking at what is happening politically and socially, because nonprofits most times address a social issue, right, which is driven by political agenda. So in the work that you do or are doing, how important is this, or how does it show up in the work that you're doing with nonprofits? And anyone can answer that.
The government gave out a lot of money due to COVID. There's a lot of COVID dollars out there. And even though they're saying COVID is going to be a long-term impact, because it is, those COVID dollars are not always going to be around. We kind of saw that just with unemployment, where everybody got that extra unemployment money, and everybody was happy and living their best life. And they kept saying, this is going to end. This is going to end. And when it ended, people were like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
And they were shocked.
They were shocked. COVID is a season. Right now, the season been going on since 2019, 2020, when all the money started coming out. But COVID is a season. It's going to end. Funders, the government is going to shift their priorities. Private funders is going to shift their priorities. We see a lot of private funders was giving out a lot of money for COVID relief. And that could have been just from buying PPEs to ensuring people had meals to ensure people had access to their medications.
Mm-hmm.
Even those needs are still going to need to be met. So like I was just talking to an organization the other day, like we have all these COVID-19 locations where we went into these communities to provide their services, but how y'all going to continue these services? So like you have to think of that plan, that money train is going to end.
Mm-hmm.
Let me start thinking of other ways to continue that program because we still see the need for it, what other ways to jump on. And there again, we could look at private grants, we could look at foundations, we could look at the government, we could look at government contracts, bidding for a government contract. We can look at reimbursement rates through the government. We can look at, slipping in my mind. It might come out. But there's so many other ways we can look at it, still bring in money to support the program. So it's very important to think of that next step. Like, yes, we got this money. Like, let's say today, if one of my grants I wrote got approved for $1.5 million, yes, we got this money. This is not enough money for what we're trying to do, but yes, we got this money. Even though I'm about 80% sure we're going to at least move to the next stage, for that same program, I'm still looking for 3 or 4 other grants. And the organization has already received one grant a couple of years ago for the same program that's not off the ground yet. There was $5 million. Because like you constantly need a flow of money coming in. You constantly need to think about if we create affordable housing, right? We're going to charge these individuals for rent. So that's some type of income coming in, but that's also the income to maintain the property.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough income for maintaining the property? What other ways can we get source of income and still serve the population we serve? I think a lot of people get scared when they hear fee for service and think, well, if I'm trying to help the people we identify as poor, I can't charge them. You're not charging them. If they receive Medicaid, there's a way to bill for that. And when we are writing grants and when we're writing a program, we need to really think about what type of program we're writing. If, for example, if we're doing case management with kids, let's write for social workers. Why? Because we know that we could do a fee for service if we have social workers providing that services. Unlike if we just have a case manager with a human service background. Same education, but different requirements in Maryland. So like we have to think like when we're developing a program, what ways we can incorporate sure that we could get income from other sources.
Well, and then it goes back to Karen, start with the end in mind. That was the first thing that she said, right? So if you're starting with the end in mind to say, COVID's not going to be around forever, and this money possibly will dry up. If it dries up, what will we need to keep it going? If you start there, then working backwards, you can certainly say, well, when we get this COVID money, it will also help you to determine how you spend that money. What are you investing in so that when the money goes away, you have things in place? So it right back to Karen's philosophy. Start with the end in mind.
Starting with the end in mind. And what came as I was listening, to Christina, what jumped out at me was first and foremost, you have to have a sense of the pulse. Like what is the next need that is coming, and how can your organization pivot or position itself to be responsive to that? And so that does require some forward thinking. It does require some paying attention to what's going on socially and politically, because a lot of politics is very local, right? And so understanding what's going on in your locale and what's important to folks at that time. But then another part of this that just made me think about this was, if I can be frank, many organizations run their organizations the way they run their home. So it's like whatever's coming in is going out. And there isn't a plan for creating reserves. Are you being strategic about accessing unrestricted funding, whether through fee for service or whether through unrestricted grants, and creating a reserve for you? And it's something I took for granted coming from an engineering background. Every contract has a contingency, it's just built into it. So when I entered into the nonprofit space, I was surprised at how many organizations have no contingency in their planning and in their budgets for their programs or for their organization at large. And so it's a combination of those things, anticipation, but then also planning for the what if, right? And COVID was a huge what if for all of us. I don't think any of us could really have planned, but at least if you had some cushion aside, the blow might have been lessened, right? Or how you strategically leverage your lines of credit, or however it is that you package that together for your organization so that it's not every year or every month, whatever comes in is going right back out, and you guys have no safety net to weather some of the storms that are likely to come in these periods of transition.
one of this, which I think also goes back to the misconceptions. We think of nonprofits and we almost think of it as I like that what Krista just said, where we're thinking of it as like how we're running our house. We're thinking of it as, oh, it's just for profit, it's just non-for-profit, it's not going to make me rich. So, like anything goes, loosey-goosey. But really, there needs to be a business plan. There needs to be, with all those things built in, the contingencies, your financial statements, just as if you're going to the bank to get a business loan. So, this is all key, critical, just so important. This is such a good conversation, but I'm called onto another meeting emergency. So I'm actually going to have to call it at night with you, you
No
beautiful
problem.
young ladies, and these gorgeous glasses. I'm like admiring these glasses. You are all, I am here as I'm talking, I'm taking notes. You're all such a great wealth of resources. Thank you so much. And I'm hoping to be able to actually have you all come and share with us, even in the education space, because, with the work we're doing, I don't think I had mentioned that as chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Early Childhood Education Task Force, we're looking to get some resources. We have a community development subcommittee, and we're looking to get some resources and to generate some income to do some of the projects that's needed there, because the need is so great. Thank you all so much.
No
Have a good
problem.
night.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
No
Thanks.
problem at all.
Bye.
Bye. So I definitely want to keep this conversation going around sustainability. So are there grants that ask to see an organization's balance sheet or the previous year's profit and loss statement? Are there grants that ask for that? And if they do, what is the purpose of the grant, the funder asking for those documents?
Honestly, I can't think of a grant application when I didn't have to submit the previous year financial audit. And if your organization is not at the point to have a financial audit, you still got to release that balance sheet. You got to have something. Okay. Because nobody wants to give money to someone and you're not sure they know how to manage the money. And I realized, like, working on grant applications and reviewing them, I see a lot of people do not know the basic behind writing a budget. And a lot of people don't understand the basic of how to write goals. You have to write measurable goals. And honestly, a lot of the RFPs that I have rejected is because it's a great program. I'm not going to deny that. But you do not have a measurable goal. So at the end of the year, you're going to have a hard time to provide the data back to this funder to tell them were you successful or not. And that's why I mentioned that, like, it's really important to know how to write your goals that could be measured. And it's very important to have someone in your nonprofit, if you're not at the point where you can actually hire someone to do the accounting piece of it, have that person on your board who could do your balance sheets. You don't have to pay a lot of money for software. Software will make it easier. But Excel, bam, Google, what does Google call it? Google Sheets. Google Sheets, thank you.
Yes.
And there's a lot of templates that you could just start with and play with and add to it. You really need to know what your finances are. And if you don't know what your finances are, and you don't know if you don't have measurable goals, don't waste your time applying for that grant. Keep building on that.
I just want to add to that. I think also, particularly when we're dealing with what I consider to be, majority minority-led organizations, I have found that there's this apprehension to acquiring skill sets and knowledge that you're going to need to do your work efficiently and effectively, and people kind of shy away from that. And I'm the first person to say, I'm taking a financial management course right now as part of my graduate program, because I understand that having the fundamentals of understanding complex financial statements, when you know how to read them, when you know what to look for, they can be tools for your decision making. And I think that's the part that people don't really appreciate about budgets and financial statements. It's not just, okay, we submit receipts and we record it and we never think about it again. This is historical data for you all to go back and say, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve with the budget that we set out? Was it adequate? Was it insufficient? Were we efficient in our use of those funds? How can we do better? You know, and so really the budget is not just something that you submit because you have to, but it's really something your organization should be using as a tool for decision making and planning, so that you don't. I actually did, I did an exercise with an organization, and they have been doing this program for a while. And I asked them for a program budget, and they kind of looked at me like you're in the headlights. Like, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, how do you know how to charge? Because this was a fee for service, actually. How do you know what to charge for this particular program? So I took them through an Excel spreadsheet exercise, very, simple. And they realized that they had under budgeted by like 50%. For what it actually cost them to do the work, because they weren't really using that information as a decision-making tool, right? And so you have this information at your fingertips. It's very valuable and useful for your organization. And if you're not sure how to use it, don't be afraid to kind of step out and ask for help. There are plenty of technical assistance providers out who would love, because we know, we see these things when we're doing the work anyway. So we know it needs to be addressed. And we're like, oh, wow, somebody really wants to address these things. Okay, great. Here's what you need to do. But taking that first step to say, you know what, I need to level up a little bit in this area, whether it's the financial management, whether it's the budget preparation, whether it's the outcomes piece, which that is a very, challenging area for a lot of organizations, moving away from just counting the number of bodies, which sometimes makes sense. Like if you're feeding people, that makes sense, right? The number of people you're able to feed. But when you get into more complex programs, you need more complex and nuanced data. And so the funders are looking for that. Did you take the time to develop that data? And if you don't know how to do it yourself, did you seek the subject matter experts? Did you bring them in by leveraging partnerships or, hiring them? How did you approach that? And one thing I advise folks is that every organization has vulnerabilities. There is no organization that does not have a vulnerability, whether the budget is $5 million a year or whether it's $5,000 a year. Everybody has room to grow and improve. And so if you identify a vulnerability as you're putting a grant application together, speak to it. Say, we recognize that this is important, and here's what we're doing to put that in place. Don't ignore it. And you'll see a lot of people just say, oh, well, we don't have that, so we're just not going to speak on it. No. Because the funder's going to know you didn't speak on it. Yeah. And they're going to be like, why didn't you say something on that? Because that's one of the criteria. So go ahead and address it and say, here's what we're looking to do. This is our plan, and then stick to it. Right? And so don't have this fear like, oh, wow, we're not going to be able to address that. No, just go ahead and say, I'm sorry, my child is over here sniffling. I have 3 children with the flu. They're trying to.
We're all mothers on everybody watching, whoever watching it.
So for those that are listening, if you hear any of that in the background, those are my 3 children who are trying to let them know that, I'm still mom. And you know how kids are when they're sick. They want mom. They not want you any other time, but they want mom when they're sick. So I'll wrap that out. But yes, but just, be honest and forthright. Address things head on. Don't be afraid to ask for assistance if you need it. And if you have a vulnerability, just be upfront about it and talk about your plan to address it.
And like even now, some of the funders are actually offering their assistance. If they give you the grant, they sometimes have people on site within their organization that will help you. Another important thing is like, you might get this large grant, but every funder is different. They might give you all the money up front. They might give you money by year. They might wait for you to actually create an invoice and send it to them in order to get paid. So again, going back off of what Ms. Smith's saying, if you do not keep up to date with your finance, you're going to set yourself up for failure. You need to have that information up to date, because you never know if a donor that you met at a restaurant said, oh, that sounds interesting. Can you send me some information tomorrow? And you got to have that ready to go, because that person might be able to give you money. If not, connect you to someone who has some deeper pockets.
It's also a legal requirement anyway for nonprofits. Like your finances should be available if someone requests to see, and it could be a donor, it could be someone who gave you $50 who's requesting to kind of see how money has been spent. And so, as long as I've been in nonprofit, not just as a consultant, but I worked at large nonprofits managing departments that generated multi-million dollars, I will tell you that budget season was always the scariest, like high anxiety. Numbers and that is not my favorite thing to do. And so it causes a lot of anxiety for me. But I will tell you, and I've been in this since I was 20. So you're talking about, it as in management and having to do budgets. So that's well over 2 decades. And recently, what you're talking about here occurred on one of the boards I sit on, where there had been financial tracking over the years, but finally someone with expertise was able to come and in very simple everyday language explain how a budget works, GL ledgers, and all these words that I've been hearing over the years, and it never clicked. And as she's explaining, I'm just like, oh my goodness, we can talk about what we do in such a different way now, not just in kind of qualitative, because that's great, when you hear testimonials from folks, but there are others who really want to see the impact when it comes to numbers. They want to see a numerical number, not just we served 2,000 people or we raised X amount, but how was that money spent? What was it spent on? Anyone who sits on a board, any organization should be able to say each year, what do you spend most of your funds on? Right? You should at least be able to do that. What is something what is a program that you have that's a revenue drainer? It's draining revenue, but it's not really bringing in, it's the return on investment is not that great, right? So financial responsibility, back to that investor I talked about before. No one wants to invest their money in anyone in an organization who has not proven to be financially transparent, but also responsible, that you are responsible with whatever little money you have. It could be $500, as Christina said, or $5,000 or $5 million. That's not, if you're irresponsible with that and you're not managing that well, no funder is going to want to give you an additional funds as well. So that's important before you even start looking at grants, right? We did before you start looking at grants 2 weeks ago. Remember, there's certain things you need to have in place, and your financial statements is one of them. A budget, being able to have that information.
I think we also got to take it back, because we're talking about nonprofits that are already established. If you're just starting off the board, just coming out the closet, the best thing you could do is partner with a nonprofit that's already established. There's enough money out there for nonprofits to work together. A nonprofit and a social enterprise could get together. If you don't have your nonprofit status yet, find a fiscal sponsor. There is enough money out there for y'all all to come together, work together, and still develop a stronger program. And I think a lot of people forget that. I see this in Baltimore. It's getting a little bit better, but I see this in Baltimore. It could be on the same street, two nonprofits that do the same thing, but they don't interact with each other. And I'm like, y'all not better than serving the community that way. We got to remember, you're a nonprofit for a reason. Yes, we all need to make money. We need to employ our staff. We need to be able to grow our program. So we do need money coming in. Nobody said a nonprofit has to be a broke type of business. Mm-hmm. It's still a business. But you have to understand the importance of partnership. If you're new, if you're less than 5 years, if you're 3 years, if you're 1 year, partnership is the way to go. And I'm seeing a lot, there was a government grant that was just released earlier this week from the Maryland Department of Labor. This grant is requiring you to have 2 community partners. So even if your organization offer both of the services, workforce development and homeless services, you can't do both. You got to find another organization to offer one of these services. So y'all 2 are coming together. Then you have to have an employee partner. So it could be a tech company out of here. It could be a healthcare company. It could be Broadway services. You got to bring them on board. And then you have to have 2 other additional partners. So they're like, this is enough money out here. Y'all need to come together to make this successful. Because to be honest, to make any program successful, one organization can't do it by itself. You got to partner with somebody. If you are feeding the homeless, you're going to want to have mental health coming in. And if you don't have mental health on your boat, that's a partnership. So people need to understand partnership is another form of money. That's your in-kind. That partnership, what they bring to the table.
Absolutely.
As my mentor works me, my mentor is on this call, so I could say this. It's a partnership.
It's not Kieran.
Absolutely. I want to piggyback on that because I'm sorry. One thing that we don't always talk about when we talk about grant writing, there's a lot of focus on the grant, but there's not a lot of focus on the relationship building with the funder. And at the end of the day, it should be a win-win for the three entities that are involved, you as the grantee, the grantor, and the constituents, right?
Yes.
And so we have to be thinking, how can we make this a win-win for all of the parties involved, which means you have to spend some time knowing your constituents. And actually, I think that in the session just before this, Melanie was talking about the needs assessment. I caught the tail end of her presentation. And I was like, yes, the needs assessment. How do you know that the people you say you want to serve need what you say they need? And did they say that's what they need?
Right.
And so having some needs assessment in place, so you're speaking to them. And then the funder, what is important to the funder? Because you want to make them choosing you easy, because they can see you are advancing their agenda in addition to advancing it, not in place of, but in addition to, that there's synergy there with what you all are doing. And so it takes you having an understanding of your funder, an understanding of your constituents, and an understanding of your organization, and that there's an alignment there. And funders are looking for the biggest return on their investment. For many funders, that still means the biggest number of people that they can impact, or if they're doing more kind of substantive systemic change, they want to see some structural changes that you're proposing. So you really want to think about what is going to be in it for this funder that aligns with what we are trying to do. And when you have that alignment, I have not seen folks not get funded unless the money was just not available.
Right.
And that does sometimes happen, where they come back and they say, oh my gosh, we really wanted to choose you, but we can
Mhm.
only give 5,000 and we know you really needed 25,000, so that does, but you've now established a relationship with them, struck a chord with them. You need to nurture that. You need to follow up with them. The next grant cycle, make sure your grant is the first one in. Right? And not waiting until the end, because a lot of people wait to the end. And we just went through this whole thing with ARPA here, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. For those that are on the call that are not familiar, this is COVID relief funding. And one of the things I advised all of the organizations that I was working with was, do not wait until that last day. Get in early, get in front of them early, because now you're setting the bar. Right? You're setting the bar for what's coming after that, as opposed, because they're reviewing them in the order pretty much that they received them. So you get in early and you let your proposal speak for itself. You don't want to come in with a tsunami of 250 other folks, with at that point, they're kind of probably just going through their checklist, right? So get in early, be strong, have your argument together. And so, we'll see how that plays out. They haven't fully released the results of that. But just some of these things, think about those three things: what's in it for you, what's in it for the funder, and what's in it for the constituents you serve.
And I have seen organizations where funders approach them about, we have some funds, let's talk about how we can support. And I have seen in over the course of working in nonprofit leadership, that one of the things, there's a couple of organizations I worked with, and what attracted that funder to approach them was the partnership they had. They noticed that they had partnerships with so many different, not just organizations, but they had relationships with small businesses. They had relationships with schools, with churches, with small local clinics. So they had a very diverse partnership list that they were actively engaged with. It wasn't just partners that they were getting because, oh, we have this grant coming out, but these were partners that they have cultivated over the course of time. And in doing that, that organization had become credible in the community. And because they had become credible, that funder then wanted their money attached to the work that was being done. Because as you said, Karen, it makes that funder look good to say that we partnered with this organization who has 40 different partnership streams in that same community that's helping to make this work happen. So you're both absolutely right in that sometimes as nonprofit organizations, especially when we're small starting out, we really underestimate the power of partnerships and how partnerships can actually leverage us to our next level. Partnerships can bring us in funding. Christina talked about shared resources, right? Where you're sharing the expense of even an employee. Right. So you have shared expenses that you can split between both organizations. And then the in-kind part, which also equates to a dollar amount on a budget. Right. So really partnerships and grant writing, like I didn't even really make the connection really until just now we're talking. I'm like, oh my goodness, you absolutely must have strong partnerships and have build relationships with funders, even if you don't get the grants. So in that vein, if you don't get a grant from a funder, what should be the organization's next step? Is it allowable for them to contact the funder to say, hey, no, didn't get it, just trying to find out why, so next time, or what areas could we work on? Is that common or something that organizations should do if they don't get a grant? Or is that a no-no?
I think it depends, because like some organizations will tell you, like right on the website, don't call us, don't mail us. So like you need to listen to that language. If it says don't call them, don't mail them. But if you like see the individual name, you could reach out to them on Twitter or LinkedIn. Don't just go like, oh, why I didn't get the money.
Yeah.
But like,
well,
people do that now, but establish a relationship with them, just like you're on the job. But follow the languages on the website. If they say don't call them, don't call them. If they say don't email them, don't email them. Also, some funders, like how you said earlier, they'll reach out to the organization. Some won't let you just apply. You have to be invited. So if there's one of the organizations that you have to be invited with, you need to hop on LinkedIn, find out who works there, and start networking. And so like if you're in, so on the board, president of the organization, COO, CFO, CEO, any of the O's, part of your job is networking, building those relationships. And if you don't have the necessary skills on how to build those relationships, there's enough stuff out here on the internet, a book from the library, that you could find and learn those things. Your public library is a good resource when it comes to finding grants. Your public library is a good, they have different types of workshops there. They will have a workshop on communication. I have seen workshops on grant writing there. I have seen workshops on goal setting. Find a local funder, foundation, like the Family League in Baltimore. I was going to their workshops on goal writing. I don't know why. I just like professional development. I'm a nerd. I know why. But I was going to their workshops on goal writing when I wasn't even in this field. Okay.
Yeah.
So what did I learn there? I know how to write measurable goals. I met people. And I continue to expand my network. So there's so many resources out there, and a lot of those resources you don't have to pay little to nothing. But there's also resources out there where you do have to pay, and you need to be prepared for that, and you need to write that in your budget. When you're working on your budget, make sure you put the administrative costs in there, but also make sure your administrative cost is not high. A lot of funders are not going to try to give you money if 35, 40%, 50% of your budget is administrative costs. It shouldn't be more. Most of them don't want to be more than 10 of what their money they're giving you, 10% of administrative costs. So your administrative costs across the board should be like, try to keep it at 15% or lower.
I definitely want to piggyback on that in terms of how to find grants, and you hit it on the nail. One of the things that I have found is going to these different professional development opportunities, and you get on mailing lists. Okay? So the grants are coming to you. You don't even necessarily have to go out and search for them, because you're now in that communication loop. When a funder is like, okay, we're putting it out, you're among the first to know. And so, you know, and taking advantage of opportunities to develop those relationships with funders, you know, and going to their events, making yourself visible. There was a time in my life before I had my children where I was at those kind of events all the time, and pre-COVID too, because they were all in person. But you're visible and you're having conversations, and people will remember you. Oh yeah, I saw you at that workshop. Yes, that was me. You know, oh, I didn't know you had that organization. And they'll tell me more. And that's when you need to be ready for that conversation. Okay, here's more about my organization and the follow-up. So getting out there and you know, and making these connections, it don't have to be all that hard. You know, you can strategic though, and identify organizations that again align with what you do. Their goals, their values align with yours, and that makes it less of a reach. The one other thing that I had here from one of the earlier questions that we had was, oh no, I think we did that already. I have my little cheat sheet here. I think we talked about
you
that.
You can go back, it's fine, but you can go back in.
Yeah, it was about getting on the email list, and we talked a little bit about how to search for grants just now. But I wanted to just say, don't skip the pre-proposal process. What I mean by that is, before you look at any grants, okay, before you look at any grants, can you answer what it is that you do, how you do it, why you do it that way, how what you do is important, and why this should matter to the funder. Like, if you can't answer those questions without looking at a grant, it's going to be harder for you to answer them in the grant, right? So there's some pre-proposal work that you and your team need to sit down and say, why are we doing what we do? How do we do it? How do we know that this approach works, right? And why would this matter to a funder? So when you get ready to sit before them, you've already answered those questions, and you're not building the ship as, building the plane as you fly it, which are very difficult grants to write. And I'm saying that as a grant writer, and I'm sure those of you that do grant writing can say the same thing. It's very difficult to write those, and it comes through to the funder. And I think you said that, Christina, very early on. They can see through that. They're reviewing hundreds of grants, hundreds of grants. They've seen it all. They've seen it all. And so you don't want your proposal to come across as not having been thought out well, right? You want to show that you took the time and you respected their time by putting the effort into that proposal. And that was what I wanted to say.
And that goes back to the workshop I did a couple of weeks ago. I
was about to mention, like 2 weeks ago,
creating
it was all up
a
in
proposal
there.
outline. Create your outline for each of your programs. It should tell what your mission statement is, this program, the statement of need. Today at work, I wrote 8 LOIs, letters of inquiry, 8 today at work. And the reason I could say I was able to get those 8 out is because I had my proposal outline. I go back to that, I pull a little information here and there, and I treat what the funder is asking for. I'm not just saying I just use my outline. I also add additional stuff that the funder is asking for and able to get them out. If I did not have that proposal outline, you think I would be able to write 8 LOIs in one day? No. So it's really important. Like, you can't look for a grant if you don't have your program on a piece of paper. And then you write that out, that proposal outline, and you use that as your Bible to go and continue to apply for grants. And you continue to add to it. And Maryland, I'm not gonna say it right, help me out.
Is it the Maryland Philanthropy?
Thank you.
Okay.
I can never get it out right. Thank you.
No, I didn't win a prize, but it's okay.
Network on their website, they have a letter of inquiry format, they have a proposal format, they have a grant report format. That is your Bible. Download it, use it, change it for your program.
And Christina mentioned 2 weeks ago, she did the workshop on before you even start looking for grants, because as I mentioned at the beginning of that workshop, is that lots of startup organizations think because they have their 501c3, that means woohoo, they can jump on the grant train and the grants is going to come. They can pull grants off trees, just walking and pulling grants off trees. And what I always say to my new clients is, your 501c3 gets you in the room. It does not give you a seat at the table, and it does not give you a plate. It gets you in the room. And so once you're in that room, you have to work the room. You have to network. You have to figure out who's in the room, what are their positions. And this could also be other organizations. It could be other organizations in the room, and you're like, you know what? I need to talk about if we can partner to get this done, right? So the 501c3 is not a guarantee for anything other than a tax exempt status. It's not a guarantee for success, and it's not a guarantee that a funder is going to give you money automatically because you are. There are almost 2 million, and I haven't checked since COVID because I'm sure nonprofits have popped up since COVID in the US going after sometimes very similar funds, right? And so that competitiveness. So you get 501c3 only gets you in the room. You still have to get a seat at the table and a plate, right? And there's a strategy around that. And some of the things that Christina talked about tonight, Karen talked about tonight, Melanie, Dr. Sherry Ann. 2 weeks ago, we had Lauren from the National Aquarium, who from their philanthropy department, who gave a whole presentation, a whole hour-long presentation on just where to find, how to look for them and where to find them. And you're hearing information repeated tonight. The library, getting on listservs, networking, getting on LinkedIn and working your social media. I'm on a board with Christina, and she's forever about these hashtags and algorithms. And I'm like, please leave me alone. But those things are important, right? Because that is the new form of networking. And that's how you can have people start to watch your work, because people watch you and they may not comment, they may not like, but they're watching what they see. They're watching who you're partnering with. They're watching the work you're doing, how you're documenting it, how you're tracking it. All those things are really important to your story. So when it's time to write a grant, that's all you're doing. You're telling your story. All those questions that Karen just said you should be able to answer, those are parts of a nonprofit storytelling. Who, what, where, how, why? Why should, out of all, if we get 50 proposals, why should the funder pick yours? Why does your program or your organization, why is your program or organization the program and organization of choice when it comes to addressing this particular social issue or being in this particular space? What makes you the expert? What makes you the one that we need to invest in, right? All those things are important, but you have to have the groundwork laid. Your ducks don't have to be in a row, but they at least need to be in the pond. Right? They don't have to be, because let me tell you, nonprofit work, if you're chasing perfection, this is not the place to be, right? And I don't think there's any funder who's looking for perfection. What they're looking for is transparency, vulnerability, and accountability.
And it goes back to what Ms. Smith said earlier. She was talking about, don't be afraid to identify your risks, because now they asking you that question straight out. What is the risk of this project? And don't sit there and say, oh, nothing. List a possible risk, because you already thought of one, and what you think a solution that might work for it. Now, will that solution work? It might and it might not. But they want to see that you can at least plan it. You could be ready to go.
And you're transparent. The worst thing is for a funder to give you funds and then find out after you've been awarded that you cannot manage what they've given you. That's a bridge burnt. And the funding space is tiny.
I was several bridges burnt, because they're going to share that information. So it's not just that one bridge, it's all the other bridges that they're connected to. They're like, oh no, you don't want to get to them. So
very tiny. It's a whole United States, but let me tell you, the community that funds, that gives money, is very small, and you don't want to end up on their bounce checklist, right? Because they gave you this fund and you bounced it, right? You bounced a check that they wrote on your behalf. So it's really important that from the very get-go, if you are listening to this and you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, even I'm a nonprofit consultant, the last 2 weeks, I have talked about 4 or 5 potential folks who approach me about helping them out of starting a nonprofit. Why did Rachel do that? Because their why was not significant enough. Their why was not that. This is not the space you need to be in. So your why needs to be really compelling. And if I can turn someone away because this is how I make my income, and say, nah, you're not. Someone who has the money to give, it's the same thing. The same thing, right? Your why, you have to be able to explain it. They have to feel the passion in your writing, and it will come through. But that transparency, vulnerability, and accountability is so very important. Not just in the grant space, but in the nonprofit space and how you function. Any last words? Go ahead. Sorry, I know. Go
ahead, Christina. Go ahead, Christina.
Come on now.
I'm sorry. I know you're about to wrap it up. I just want to say one more thing. Every day you interact with some organization that could possibly give you your organization money. Think about this. When you go into Safeway and go grocery shopping, they give out money to the community. It's usually money that their employees take out their check, but they donate that back to the community. Walmart, you could apply for a grant for one Walmart store and a different Walmart store, or the Sam's Club. Like, everything you interact with every day gives out money. Amazon, Whole Foods, but also a lot of those organizations, companies like that, want you to be connected with an employee there. So no, you don't gotta be connected with the store manager, but that cashier right there, hey, anyone needs to be in your network.
Yep.
So like, or a grant that I'm working on right now with Rachel for the foundation. We need a community partner for the organizer. Hey, sis. Yeah, so sis. I called her yesterday. I was like, hey. She's like, all right, just put my name on it. Thank you. You got a network. Anybody can help you secure funds for your nonprofit.
Absolutely. And having that abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset. You know, that there's enough funding.
One more time, Karen.
Having an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset where we are, you know, like crabs in a barrel trying to fight each other for these resources. No, let's work together and, you know, help pull each other up. And, you know, they say a rising tide lifts all ships. So these are all concepts that we should keep in mind. One thing I wanted to say was we don't often pay attention to our web footprint for our organization. And you have a lot of folks who have a lot of outdated, erroneous information out there about their organization. And what that conveys to a funder who does a quick search on you is that you're not on top of your stuff. So either have a small footprint that you are managing, or make sure you have a team or someone who's helping you to keep these things updated, whether it's on GuideStar, whether it's wherever your organization shows up. You need to Google your organization, see what comes up, see what you need to update, see what you need to take down, because if you don't, it's going to be there and a funder may find it, and it could be the difference between you getting selected and you not getting selected. Be mindful of your organization's web footprint and manage that, or keep it small until you can really fully manage that well.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's like a whole nother workshop right there. Seriously. So ladies, I mean, the hour has flown by so quickly. This was a really great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope that the two of you will be open in the future to coming back and talking about other topics as it relates to the nonprofit sector. We know that, you know, Jamaica is a country that is predominantly Black and brown people. And so we know even in that space and the work that's being done when it comes to equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in that particular space is really important. And that is definitely a conversation that's also tied to grants, the number of Black and brown organizations that get funded. Right? And that's one side of the conversation. The other side of the conversation is why some of the things we talked about tonight, are those things in place? Are these basic things in place? A budget? Are you able to speak to your why, where, how? Or do you have a board that is functioning? Your footprint, are you maintaining that? All these pieces that we talked about tonight that are tied to grant writing. I really am passionate about making sure our communities and the organizations that serve at-risk and minority communities globally, even though Jamaica is predominantly a Black and brown country, still, right, that we are functioning with excellence, and that we are educated, and that the folks who are leading organizations that serve our communities know what to do, where to go, how to do it, and all the things in between. And this is why I like having these conversations, because we're sharing resources, we're sharing our talent in order to help our global community become a better place. So I appreciate the both of you for taking time out of your schedules to join me tonight for this conversation. If anyone asks about your contact information, would you mind sharing? If anybody would like your contact information, not ask. If anybody would like your contact information, if you wouldn't mind sharing it here, and then what I'll do is what you share, I'll include it in the comment section and a description section of this video. So if folks are looking to connect with either one of you, if you can just verbally give your contact information, and then I'll make sure that it's added to the video description. Either of you can go. Who wants to go first? Where can they find you? Should we just do a social media? Where can they find their social media, or maybe a website?
Is it something we can also put in the chat, or is it best to just say it verbally?
You can just say it verbally for those who may be watching.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back and make sure it gets in the chat as well, so that folks can actually see it in there. But just as we're ending, if someone wants to find you, what is the one best way to find you?
The best way to find me, again, I'm Kieran Smith, is through my contact page on my website. And it's amanaconsulting.com/contact. And that is M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, consulting.com/contact. So that's the best way to get in contact with me. It puts you right into the pipeline for us to try to schedule, maybe even just a touch base over Zoom or phone. And I think it's, even if you're not sure what you might be interested in, even if it's just a networking, touching base, or you had a question about something, feel free to reach out. I agree. The knowledge sharing and the information sharing is important for us to all collectively grow. So I'm certainly open to that and look forward to hopefully participating in future events and then also possibly meeting some of the participants as well.
Absolutely. You'll be back, Christina.
I know I got to write down her name before we close out. I don't have a pen nearby.
Oh no, I can send you. I have all her information.
Okay. So my website is CES, C as in cat, E as in Lane, S as in Sam, consultingmd.com. You can reach me on there. It gives you my email address, my phone number, how to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So I'm definitely on social media.
You can find them everywhere. All right. So for those of you who joined us live, thank you so much for joining us for another JD Watt. We call them JAMINARs, Jamaica webinars. We combine the words. So these are JAMINARs. So thank you for joining us for another JAMINAR series. Please stay tuned for our spring. This spring, we're going to have another series of workshops that are going to tackle some of the ouch spots that nonprofits experience in hopes to help to bring you some ease to those pain areas that we all experience in this work. You may see some of these amazing professionals you saw tonight in the spring as well. You may see some new faces as we bring you topics and speakers that we think will inspire you and provide you what you need. Have a great night. I know it's a long weekend for many of us who are in the US. Enjoy your long weekend, and I will see you again soon. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.